Fabulous. Ave Maria, everyone. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, as you said, Liz, it's a journey. Strategic pivoting is a journey. And last session a couple of weeks back was a 101. I called it kind of like a speed dating, version of strategic pivoting. And that hamburger model, for those of you who attended, was just my very simple attempt to try and make it really, really simple. Today's a little bit different. I'll still work at speed, and it will be a sort of a compressed, condensed version of strategic pivoting, but we are going a little bit more in depth. We are going through models, and we'll go through the process, and I'll give some nice frameworks for people. And I saw one of the questions, RJ, that came up around sort of desirability, feasibility, and viability. So we'll touch on that during the session. So I guess that, in terms of last session, and for those who haven't attended, just to give a quick synopsis, really, pivoting in a nutshell is around a fundamental shift to your business. And that fundamental shift to your business is in response to fundamental changes in the marketplace with your customers or otherwise. And you need to do, if I were to summarize, last session in sort of four things, you need to do four things. The first is really to appraise that market, follow the demand, get the insight from the market, get the insight from the customers, and capture that. The second thing that you want to do is appraise your business. Appraise it with new eyes. Appraise it as if every part of your business could be a potential asset. And then once you've done that, you're looking for those Tinder matches that I talked about. Where is there a match between a need and what you can provide? And this is where we find what I call the secret sauce, your pivoting assets. And then the third thing you do is that you innovate, and you innovate rapidly, and you're trying to create something of value that is desirable, feasible, and viable. And then once you've done that, then the fourth thing that you do is then you reorientate your business and your business operations. So that's sort of a summary of last session.
So Melissa, is that a workable approach?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, it's a very, very smart, pragmatic approach for surviving and moving really, really rapidly. But the thing is when you think longer term, when you think future, you've got to do a little bit more than that. And you have to do more than that because markets change, demand change, constraints change. The constraints are lifting, demand is shifting, competitors are shifting. So you need to move beyond that to apply, a little bit of more of a strategic approach. And that's what I do more of. So it's far less of that sort of tactical play, which you apply far more in games and high performance teams. It's far more strategic, and it's far more really reflective of what pivoting is all about, which is a fundamental shift. Yeah.
Okay. So then, I briefly talked in the introduction about what today, but tell us a little bit about what today's session is going to be about then.
Okay, so we'll go through some models. I'm actually going to give you a few different models, and we'll just talk through them, and we'll talk through some pros and cons on them. And again, I'll do this in a super condensed way. I'll share with you a very simple process to follow. This is the process that I use with my clients at Tensegrity. And it's a process that sort of assimilates a lot of the good stuff out of the models that have been out there. We are going to go deeper on insight. And so we're going to go deeper on insight. And I'm also going to touch on at the end on some of the things which are really, really important to the philosophy of design thinking and is absolutely critical in the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous world that we find ourselves in. Because this is not a one, track pony, yeah? This is an ongoing pivoting journey in response, and the ability to adapt is really critical. So we're going to touch on that.
Cool. So you mentioned models, and just before you get started, one of the questions last week was about how, this relates to lean. Can you talk a little bit more about that before you kick in?
Yes, sure. So last week I really talked to the essence of pivoting. And the thing is that I would say about models, firstly, is do what's right for you. There is no perfect model because no two businesses are the same. So do what's right for you. So try things on for size and adjust it yourself accordingly. The second thing that I'd say is, to be honest, a lot of these models are written and case studies are written that make things look really perfect, you know, with that 2020 vision of hindsight. But the reality, it's messy. It's messy. It's real life, real people, real time, and it's never as beautiful as a simple model. So just be mindful of that, and it's all okay. So when I go through the models, I just, you know, try them on for size and look to see what works for you, but don't hold them too closely.
Yes, I love the idea of, you know, this isn't prescriptive, is it? So
it's not prescriptive at all. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get stuck in. So I'll just share my screen now, and we'll hop into the slide deck. Okay, so alrighty, useful models. Here we go. I've stuck them all on a page for you. Right, the first thing is, let's go from top to bottom, left to right. So the business model canvas. This is a model that came developed by Alex Osterwalder in 2010, and it's a fabulous model to use, and many businesses will be familiar with this model. It's a great model if you've got an existing business. It goes through you know, parts of your business operations. It equally goes through parts of your customers, and then it goes through, okay, well, how might you monetize that? So you'll recall me talking about the 3 principles of design thinking last time, in terms of, is it desirable, is it financially viable, and is it operationally feasible? And that is baked into this. That model itself, which is actually up on the top right-hand corner, was a model that was developed up by IDEO a long time ago. And that's been baked into Alexander Osterwalder's model. So if you're looking at his model, the top left-hand side is all around how feasible it is. It's all about your value delivery. The top right-hand side of the model is really about how desirable is it, you know, and it's the value creation side of things. And your value proposition sits in the middle. And then the bottom part, which is all about your cost structures and revenue structures, is really about your value capture. You know, how financially viable is this? So that's the essence of that model. And it's a very, very useful model for established businesses. It can be a little bit tricky to interpret sometimes, so just be mindful of that. Now, the model in the middle is a lean startup canvas model, and that's by Ash Maura. And he's written a couple of books, Running Lean and so forth, a little bit later. And so he interpreted Osterwalder's model, and he just really honed it in as a far more simple version of a model, which is really useful for startups. So I use this a lot for my startup clients and also for my master's students because they're creating their own startup concepts. So it's a little bit less complicated. And it's great for tech stuff. It's great if you're in the tech game, and it's particularly useful. I do find it has a little bit of a narrow lens. So it doesn't look at value through the value chain, of course, because it's for startups, and so the lens can be a little bit limited. But the key thing to really press home is just use that criteria of those 3 circles. Is it desirable? Is it feasible? Is it viable? If you only remember one thing, that's the most important thing within human-centered design. Now, in a design thinking world, we look at things not just appraising them, but we go through a process. And the process itself and the sequence with which we go through that process is really pivotal in terms of unlocking things, which is why it's useful as a pivoting journey. So what you've got on the bottom left-hand side is the Stanford D School's design thinking process. And IDEO has its own version, but the Stanford one tends to be shared a little bit more. And that goes through a process of empathy and defining and then ideating. And if you look at the blue and the green, that's really all around discovery, but deep discovery, deep, not just appraising the market and appraising your customers, but deeply walking in their shoes, walking alongside them and bearing witness to their needs. And that's what that's all about. And then the orange and the red and the burgundy is really about the design process, which you ideate and then you prototype and then you test. And it's a very, very iterative process. And you circle back all the time. The thing to bear in mind, and it's important to remember, is insight is an ongoing thing. You don't just do it at the beginning and then forget about it. And that's really important to remember in a VUCA world. You're constantly ideating, coming up with ideas, and then circling back to what's the insight behind it. And it's a very circular, iterative process. Now, over in the middle bottom, I've got some Silicon Valley interpretations. Now, Steve Blank developed up a lovely model, his customer development model. That was back in the 1990s. It's a really nice model. And it's really nice because it's very, very simple, and it talks through the stages of product, what's called the product solution fit. And then I think I mentioned in the last session about a product market fit and then going into scale. Now, he talks a lot, and he's written a book as well, just around the whole pivoting process. What I would add, just as a little bit of a caveat to it, is that a lot of the tech startups would be led with the idea, hey, I've got a great idea, and how do I find a home to it? And hopefully you'll remember from last session that no, you lead with the need. And what is the need? What does the market need? And how do I address that? So a lot of the pivoting of going back from product market fit to product solution fit is as a result of startups not having fully thought through the need first and just leading them with a bright idea. And you can avoid that because that's wasted time. So the process that I follow at Tent and Security and the model that I have developed up really synthesizes the design thinking approach with that business model canvas. And then I've integrated that with a systems lens, because I'm a systems-based design practitioner. And so it picks up lean thinking, not lean canvas, but lean thinking, the whole Toyota production model, Porter's value chain, and a lot of the sort of agile stuff. And as you mentioned in your intro, Liz, the whole notion of me being passionate about holistic sustainability, it also picks up cradle to cradle principles. And OODA decisioning is just really the notion of, that was developed in the 60s by an Air Force colonel, colonel rather. And that's just the notion of, you observe and then you orientate yourself, then you decide and then you act. And that sits within that. And that was picked up by sort of stage gating and project management versions as well. So these are useful tools and useful models to be aware of.
So Melissa, some people will be familiar with some of them. Maybe some on the webinar this morning will be familiar with most of them, but I guess a question that must be occurring to most people is, which model should you use and where do you start?
Yeah, yeah. So as I said before, use the model that's best for you. I, as a design thinking practitioner and obviously advocate, would always encourage you to follow a process of discovery and insight, and then you go through into innovation and design. Use the model that's right for you, but first and foremost, start with the insight. I would say, and this is part of the process that I use, and I'll just flick onto that so you can see that a little bit more clearly. This is the process that I have at Tent Security, and it starts with insight. And you start with insight for all the reasons that I've mentioned. We need to be ongoingly agile in a VUCA world. And you need to start wider than just your customers. You need to appraise the whole ecosystem, as I call it. And that's really, really important. And a lot of opportunities get missed. And so some of those, you know, the Osterwalder and the Mulders models can often miss that because their lenses are a little bit too narrow. So the process of looking wider at your ecosystem throws up a lot more opportunity, and it gives you far richer insight in terms of the contextual landscape and therefore how you need to orientate yourself to maximize, you know, the opportunity, but also to minimize the risk. Classic SWOT stuff. Yeah. So start with insight. You're probably going, you know, I have 5 stages. It's insight, strategy, design, test, and blueprint. And there's very deliberately 2 diamonds. We call them design diamonds, but there's 2 diamonds for insight for that very reason. You need to spend good time up front here. And this is where I think I mentioned in the last webinar, things can often be hidden in plain sight. You know, when I presented, you know, stuff to you and your exec and board, you know, they were, oh, wow. And I get that a lot. And there are some skills that you can learn around how to actually gain rich insight.
So, Melissa, who needs to follow the process? Okay,
so again, giving you another model here. Last time we talked about those Tinder matches, you know, appraising the market and appraising the business. So here's just a very, very simple model, and it just talks of looking on the one side, looking where that demand is. And so that's your vertical, and you're looking at, you know, is it high demand or long-term demand? And at the bottom, you know, is it low demand or short-term? And then on the horizontal axis, you're looking at fits, you know, do I have high fit as a business, you know, to best respond, or is my fit low? And if you're in that bottom left, you know, in the amber zone, you know, you want to quit out, and you want to quit out fast. And you need to rapidly move upwards to a pivoting point. If you're in the bottom left, you know, you might find that you've got a strong fit, but the demand isn't there ongoing. And so we've seen a lot of businesses quickly, rapidly pivot themselves, but then the demand shifts, you know, the channels shift, and things move on. And so milk it while it's there, but you still need to pivot. And so this is the difference between a short-term tactical play and then a long-term strategic pivot. And so that pivoting allows you to shift from being a low-fit business operation to really moving to a high-fit model that is catering to where the long-term demand is. So where are you now, and where do you want to be? And this is, again, a model I take clients through, and it's kind of looking at that whole survive, revive, thrive process. But really, it's like, where are you, you know, and where do you want to be? And I've got this little analogy of, you know, you're sleeping, you know, you're snoozing, are you stirring, are you awake, or are you woke, you know? And that's really a direct relationship to your business performance. And the thing is you might have responded really, really well to the initial changes of lockdown, but you can fall off that. And likewise, you know, you can fall off again, even if you've had strong demand and you've been generating revenue in the last couple of months, as so many businesses have done. But now it's time to think a little bit differently. Now it's time to say, okay, well, what questions do I need to ask myself to move into a more structural change? So, yeah, go ahead.
So maybe I'm interrupting too soon, but I'm just thinking about that kind of zone of consciousness, and maybe that's where you're going now, but, you know, to avoid those red lines. Yeah.
Touche. Let me just touch before we get on to that, just in terms of the questions to ask yourself, and then I'll come on to that. So in terms of the questions that you need to be asking yourself, you know, you might have already been saying, we talked about this last time, you know, where's the demand? You know, what's the need? Can I build something fast? And, you know, is it going to make me money, right? You know, you're doing that, and you're doing that quickly, and that's great. That's fantastic. And that gives you breathing room to keep the lights on, to keep paying your staff, and that is absolutely critical. And well done you if you've done a good job of that. That's fantastic. But now you want to think about, well, is it sustainable operationally? And is it actually scalable? Or is, as I said before, is that demand shifting away, or the channels are shifting away? So you want to start asking yourself that. And then you go, well, is this demand actually sustainable? And am I leveraging my secret sauce in the best way possible? And then you might be asking yourself, you know, do I actually have strategic competitive advantage? You know, Ash Mori talks about it in terms of the unfair advantage, you know, and there's a spectrum there. I won't give you another model, but, you know, you move from unfair advantage to competitive advantage, to strategic competitive advantage, to strategic market advantage. Yeah, there's a spectrum there. And then if you really want to play, if you're really woke, you know, this is about disrupting systems right now. You know, am I creating a new market paradigm? Am I building, you know, long-term brand leadership, you know, what I call legacy leadership, you know, and am I contributing to the wider system? So many of the needs that have come up are needs in the wider system. You know, they're needs outside of a capitalist, you know, business market. There are needs in health and safety and well-being and community and environmental stuff. And there's business opportunity in that. You know, I'm a conscious capitalist. There's a lot of economic prosperity that can be had by a wider prosperity. So you want to be thinking about that. And then also, like I said before, that notion of agility. Am I continuously exploring and continuously experimenting? And that's key. So to your question, you know, I have this little zone of consciousness that I call, you know, which is what side of the line, you know, do you want to be on? And, you know, you can play in that low zone, and that's fine, but it's not going to be sustainable for you as a business. So I call this the line, the zone of consciousness, the zone of consciousness, connection, and congruence. And this is what I'm going to touch on today, because this is really about the essence of insight. So it starts with your who, and Simon Sinek did an amazing job, a brilliant job in championing the whole notion of why. And this is incredibly important when it comes to positioning yourself in the market. But strategically and structurally, you need to actually ask yourself a question before that. And that's about what's your who. You know, what's your who? Who is in your ecosystem? You know, and who are your customers deeply, really? And who are you now as a business with all this changing? And these are the questions you want to go deep on. And so the consciousness is really about being deeply and actively conscious as to where the value and the value potential is in your business ecosystem. Yeah. And I said last time, you know, don't go narrow, go broad, be open, have a really wide open lens, you know, that 30,000 foot view. You know, you're flying high. You know, when you're on an airplane, I don't know, but I have a batch out at Great Barrier, and so we fly out there, and when you're out there, you know, you see Rangitoto, and it looks so different from the sky, or Waiheke, you know. When you have that 30,000 foot view, it changes your perspective, and that's incredibly powerful. So carry a wide open lens to look deep across your ecosystem to find the opportunity. And there's a lot of gold, and as I said, gold that's hidden in plain sight. And then deeply connecting with your customers and their needs and their worldview. And that is changing. So you need to do that on an ongoing basis. And then realign yourself in response to that. And that will help you identify your potential. So that sort of gives you the clarity. And I talked about Steve Blank's model around product solution fit. The consciousness really helps you understand the problems that you're trying to solve, you know, the market that you're in, the Tinder matches that you have. And that connection, that deep connection with your customers helps give you that product market fit. You know, the unmet market needs you're meeting, the size of that market opportunity. You know, he talks about, you know, validating and verifying. You know, you quantify that size. You know, I call it the size of the prize. What's the size of the prize? And then it gives you your strategic direction, and it helps you align yourself. It helps you get really tight on your business operations, so that you're all, you know, swimming in the same lane, or, you know, the geese flying, you know, that analogy, you know, you're all heading in the right direction. But you need to do your homework. And so this is the kind of stuff that you need to do. You know, you need to do your market, your competitive, your macro analysis and trends. You need to look at exemplars. Who's doing an amazing job? Not necessarily in your industry, but outside. Look wider. Keep a wide open lens. Map the system. Do some value chain thinking. You know, look at your life cycle. Where's the opportunity? I mean, fundamentally, supply chains have shifted. Stuff is closed down. People are now more aware. Oh shit, I don't really understand my value chain or my life cycle. Yeah, and I work with clients on that, you know, and we can transform things quite rapidly there. And then you understand the Tinder matches that we talk about. And then with your connection, you know, go deep here. What's their priorities? What are their needs? What are their motivations? What are their pain points? Explore those deeply. This is the Stanford model of empathy. You know, explore their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs. Then do a survey. You know, like I said, Yashimura, you know, do a survey to verify and to understand that side of the prize. And for you, then as a business, you know, then you go through your purpose, your vision, your values, you know, your secret sauce, your pivoting assets. And that's the exact process that I took you guys through at Ice House. You know, we did that deep exploration first in terms of your ecosystem, in terms of your customers. And then we had that board, you know, strategy offsite, and then I helped you with your strategy. That's what this is all about, how you get really tight here. And this is a lovely little quote. You know, Peter Singer, you know, has written so many books. You know, he's a wonderful systems-based thinker, and wrote The Fifth Discipline. If you haven't read it, I thoroughly recommend it. It's quite an old book now, but still equally valid. And, you know, the whole notion of the only sustainable competitive advantage you have is your ability to learn fast, to stay agile, stay in the space. And this gives you, in marketing terms, it gives you authenticity. You know, when you're conscious of your ecosystem, you can speak with far greater authenticity. This is the holy grail of marketing. You generate advocacy with your customers, you know, and they will champion your cause. And you get far greater acumen to have a far more efficient and effective operation. You're far more streamlined, you know, in terms of lean thinking. I'm not going to go into that today, I'm conscious of time. But I'm going to give you one more model, and I'm going to move on because I am conscious of time. And this is the model to help, as I said, with your deeper thinking in terms of your, it's kind of a philosophical point, and it's the philosophy of design thinking, but it really helps you in terms of not just what you do, but how you be. You know, the be, do, have model, it's how you be, and it's a really important cultural point, a leadership point. For taking any business through change. And so you want to understand where is the tension point to pivot properly. You know, you don't want to restore the status quo. The status quo is not great. You know, we have a gift of this opportunity of disruptive change right now to really move into a far more restorative way. And that's not just in terms of your business model, but it's the wider piece. So, you know, this is the infinity loop that often gets bandied around, but it's incredibly powerful. And I use it here because it's never a fixed point. Interesting, Tom Rath, who wrote that beautiful book, Strengths Finder, that lots of people use, I think back in sort of 2007, I think it was. And he's recently, just this year, launched another book, which is called Life's Great Question. And it's all about meaning. And he's saying, well, actually, first you start with understanding your greatest contribution. If you haven't read it, it's a fabulous read. And it really talks about the notion of staying in flow. And so what are your strengths as a business? What are you passionate about as a business? And then, you know, how do you meet the world's needs? And how do you monetize that? And how do you stay in flow on an ongoing basis? And when you find that flow, when you've done the analysis, those are your Tinder matching points. Those are your pivoting points. And it's a point of tension. Yeah, it's always in flow, but it's a point of tension. And this is, you know, the ikigai, you know, in life coaching and leadership development. It's the ikigai. This is your reason for being, your in French, raison d'être, I think. I don't speak French, forgive me, I probably had terrible pronunciation, but that's that. And that's the essence of tensegrity. You know, what tensegrity is about, you know, in terms of as a system, is finding those pivot points because they're held in tension. And the key to unlocking this is really about listening. And I don't have time to touch on that today, but there's never a better time than now, because we've come out of this lockdown and we've had a chance to reconnect. We've had a chance to listen to ourselves and more deeply connect. So I just sort of encourage deep listening, and that is the key. It's the turnkey in systems terms to really unlocking your secret sauce, your pivoting points to optimize the opportunity. There are wonderful books out there, The Art of Listening. There's a great book Kate Murphy has published this year in terms of You're Not Listening. I'm donkey deep in it right now, and she talks about those, you know, CIA agents and hostage negotiators and business leaders and the power of listening. And I know your board is like, wow, how did you find that stuff? And I get that feedback a lot. It's hidden in plain sight. And I won't go into that. That's a whole other workshop, but listening is key. So yes, so that's a mad journey through some models today.
Thanks, Melissa. And I know you're conscious as I am of time, but any tips that you can share on how you do this in practice? And I guess, you know, a comment, you know, around the balance of pace, you know, versus, you know, process integrity. I'm sure, you know, people are thinking, well, this looks like it's going to take a lot of time, and do I have that time?
Yeah, thank you. Good point. So being adaptable is your biggest asset right now, and it's a juggle, right? Shit, I've been in lockdown, I'm back in, forgive me for swearing, and I've got to make up for lost time. You know, I've got my numbers to hit, and we've lost a month, and how do I come back in? And, whew, it's a lot of energy. You know, people have just, you know, gone through immense, you know, transformation, juggling work by being at home, all of these kind of things. So it's hard to create and create space and hold space. So I'd encourage discipline here. And remember last time I talked about intentionality, you know, toiling the soil, you know, be very intentional about which, you know, seeds you sow and which you don't, which weeds you pull out. So find space to work on your business and guard that space religiously. This is working on your business, not in it. And I've done this with many clients, you know, we set up secret teams, but if you're on your own, it's fine. You know, maybe it might be the first hour of every day. You know, do it when your mind is the clearest. It might be every afternoon, you know, 3 till 5. It might be every Friday afternoon. Work on what works for you, but find that space and guard that time religiously. So that's key. Set up what I call listening posts. You'll be familiar with this, Liz. You know, what are your listening posts? Set up ongoing ways to really listen ongoing to the market. As I said, listening and insight is a journey, and you want to have those baked into your operations, whether that's at the a simple question at the end of a sales call or whatever it might be. Hold a weekly review, you know, with your team or with yourself. What's new? What's changed? What's stopped? What's started? You know, how does that impact us? You know, what new things have we learned, or what have we reflected on? You know, hold that review and be disciplined in that review. And lastly, I talk about this a lot. This is incredibly powerful. Is be visual. You know, build a pivot wall. You know, whether it's just simple white pieces of paper with post-it notes on it, but it moves you into a constructing space. You're a builder. You're building walls. You're constructing something tangible. It also helps you move out of your amygdala. And we often, when our amygdala is firing, we would like to talk, and we like to be heard, and there's a lot on our hearts. But this is all about less hooey, as I say, you know, to my clients, and more doing.